Hello, Bruce P. Grether here. I'm with my cohort Nils Terringer, aka Blue Tiger, and we're having a wonderful conversation today with our mutual friend, Toby Johnson. Toby is the author of many wonderful books, and he is also the winner of the Lambda Literary Award for Nonfiction. We're here today to share with you a little bit of a discussion about how Blue and I came to create the Erotic Engineering Project and how we first met, and we can thank Toby Johnson for that. So I think I'll turn it over first to Toby and ask Toby to mention how he first connected with Nils and what happened.
Well, I work with Leve Press as a book editor and have been editing, helping Bruce get into publication, both with a series of novels called Moon Tusk and with this very fascinating and important book called The Secret of the Golden Phallus. That's really our focus today. Well, I have a website on gay spirituality with interesting topics, and Blue contacted me through my website when he was working on a video for his degree in filmmaking about his spiritual life and his spiritual life as a gay man. So it was through meeting Nils over the internet at the same time that I was working with Bruce. Very good synchronicity here. And they've ended up now working together to produce a real manifestation of this practice that for me was an idea that Bruce and I were writing about. So my editing work showed up in reality as this series.
Yeah, so Nils, from your viewpoint, what do you remember happening first, and how did that come about? That I guess Toby connected you with me, right? Because he thought you might be interested in my book.
Well, first, my dear friend Louis Elbinger, who is in my documentary Blue Flower, he recommended that I contact Toby, sort of out of the blue, and so I did, and I thought that was great, and meeting Toby was wonderful in its own experience. But then, when he wanted to send me, a copy of your book, like a pre-published copy, and I started reading about, the blue water lily that you write about in your book, and I was making a film about my search for this blue flower. I was like, whoa, okay, something's going on here, I better pay attention. So it's been a little bit of a long journey since then, getting to know you, Bruce, and keeping in touch with Toby, but this journey for me of sticking with trying to find this flower kind of led me straight into erotic engineering.
Can I mention one more little detail of this, Blue? As the point about which you contacted me was your experience of a sort of a vision of the Mahayana Buddhist character Avalokiteshvara.
Yes.
This is something I'm really fascinated with, and one of the things that interested me particularly about your work, Blue, was your experience of going into living in darkness for, 7 days?
14 days.
14 days. What a dramatic and life-altering experience. And what I remember was that one of your visions, because after the lights go out, they come back on again, don't they? Inside the mind. The world changes its place somehow. Anyway, one of your experiences was of this image of the character which you then recognized as the Mahayana Bodhisattva.
Well, I didn't know at the time. I had no idea. I had no idea who Avalokiteshvara was. It was only weeks later that I finally found on Google the image that looked like what I had seen, and that's when I made the connection.
Yeah. This is one of my real major themes in all my writing. I've told this story in every book I've written. I think that this character, Avalokiteshvara, sort of represents the self that is in everybody. And it's a wonderful idea that the way we should relate to one another is as aspects of each other. The self that is in me. To love your neighbor as yourself is to recognize that your neighbor is part of yourself. Yourself is the world you're in, not this ego in a skin bag. And it's a transformation. And your experience of living without boundaries in the darkness there, where everything sort of stretches out into eternity, is another way of doing it. And of course, what Bruce adds to this is that sexual arousal is one of the ways of overcoming these boundaries of self. My own experience of Avalokiteshvara is that the character is not sexual exactly, but in sexuality, in experiencing pleasure, we can experience our pleasure as part of our identity as Avalokiteshvara, as this being that we are all part of. And that changes how we understand sex and pleasure. So different from the Christian model in which you sort of aren't supposed to experience these as good.
Yeah, at least in the Christian model that we've been taught.
Yeah, we've been taught, yes. There's a whole esoteric Christianity that we're just now beginning to understand.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and in the archetypal sense, I believe, isn't it true that Avalokiteshvara kind of traveled from India and Tibet into China and gave rise to Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion?
Well, yes, the story is that in India, it was a fairly common iconographic principle that you could have characters that were both male and female.
Right.
So Avalokiteshvara, because she becomes everybody. So in order to be everybody, you'd have to be both male and female to be both men and women.
Right, and that makes me think of this.
So he's portrayed as perhaps male on one side and female on the other, or more commonly, just sort of as a sexy, attractive young man, usually bare-chested, wearing women's jewelry and a lady's scarf. So so he's an androgynous character. When the Buddhist missionaries brought him to China, there is no tradition in China of androgynous gods. So they saw this as a female, and he then became she, the goddess of compassion, Kuan Yin. In Japan, the name is Kwanon. When the Christians came, Francis Xavier, and bringing Christianity to China, they discover the statues of Kuan Yin and think it's the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Right. Which maybe if in the truly archetypal sense, in a way it is. Because
it is, yes.
And I thought of the divine androgyne, the androgynous nature of the divine. To me, the divine is everything, and certainly encompasses all possible sexualities and sexual expressions. So, I'm not mistaken. I think if not in China, at least in Japan, I think there's even kind of another reversal. There's sort of a male figure of Kuan Yin. I'm not sure about that, or Canon. Quanon is how it's pronounced, and then I think they sometimes say Canon. Anyway, it's fascinating because, as you said, the Chinese simply didn't have the right conceptual filter to view this figure as androgynous, or so. Very interesting series of images there. But so the interesting thing is what we bring back into this, of course, is the erotic element, which is more Tibetan, and certainly the Chinese have a strong contribution. So.
Well, yes, to go back to the book that we worked on, The Secret of the Golden Phallus,
yes,
that's a pun or a reference to The Secret of the Golden Flower,
yes,
which is a Chinese Taoist alchemical text.
Exactly. Exactly. And speaking of alchemy, I think that's one of the things that Blue and I first found we had in common was an interest in kind of the philosophical and spiritual ramifications of alchemy. I
Yeah,
don't know, Blue,
but
what do you remember? I mean, that was a big part of in your film, A Blue Flower. That's a big part of your quest, and I think it's still part of what we're doing in the
oh
sense
yeah,
of
absolutely.
an
But I
experience.
think when I first met you, I was probably still looking more into, I guess, what I would call outer alchemy, or I needed something external to myself that
Mhm.
would complete the great work.
Right.
This alchemical transmutation. I was actually filming an alchemist at the time who was literally trying to, create a physical philosopher's stone that he could take that would, rejuvenate his body and give him eternal life. And so I think I was still sort of, when I met you, on this external quest. And then I think one of the huge things that changed from talking to Toby and Bruce and reading The Secret of the Golden Phallus was realizing that this alchemical thing that I was looking for was literally inside my body. The combination of the masculine and the feminine were different sides of my own body, and it was like a real living thing that I can experience in my body, and I don't need to be looking for, you know, um, a literal blue flower or golden flower or philosopher's stone outside of myself. And that was a huge shift for me. That's obviously still going on, every day.
Yeah, definitely. And Toby is very familiar with, and Blue is also now very familiar with the Body Electric School. We have a wonderful interview that Blue did with Joseph Kramer too recently, and a lot of Joseph's work, which led to my work, really, he's still my mentor in terms of having set me on my path in many ways. Um, that has to do with a tradition that came out of the Chinese erotic alchemy. That's the Taoist teachings, which I mean, you're both familiar with that in the sense that in the Taoist teachings, the sexual energy is cultivated to high levels that are considered to be transformational. So that, in other words, instead of actually just trying to transform base metals such as lead into silver or gold, which is the traditional, as you say, Blue, external alchemy, it becomes an inner spiritual transformation.